I'm very pleased to introduce to you Mr. Bill Gordon. Bill served as a Hellcat pilot. He flew off the USS Hancock, an Essex-class aircraft carrier flying bombing and strafing missions to the Philippines and Okinawa. Please give a nice warm welcome to Bill Gordon.
Thank you. Well, as he said, my name is Bill Gordon, and I was 18 when I heard Roosevelt on the radio saying that the Pearl Harbor had been attacked and that we were in the war. So I figured I was 18, I would either be drafted or I better enlist. So I decided to enlist in the Navy Air Corps. And it was probably February of 1942 when they finally took me in. And I was in Detroit at the time, and I think the first place that we went to was in Worcester, Ohio. And it was kind of a nice school. We weren't flying at all there. We were just, we didn't even have uniforms. We were in our regular clothes, and they just didn't have enough uniforms around to get us settled. So, but we did get uniforms probably in about 2 or 3 weeks later. We learned a lot. There were Navy people there that were teaching us how to do different things with blinkers and with flags, and how to keep track of talking to ships and so forth. So it was interesting, but after about 4 or 5 weeks, we got transferred to Kalamazoo, and we started flying up there. We flew Piper Cubs and Arancas, and we did that for about 3 or 4 weeks, and that was it. And we got transferred to someplace in Iowa. It was a PreFlight School in Iowa, and we had some pretty good exercises there. We didn't do any flying, but we did a lot of walking, a lot of running. Almost every morning we'd have to run for 4 hours, 4 miles rather. So I was starting to go from about 190 pounds down to about 150. And so it was very interesting. After we got through with that pre-flight school, I went to a primary school in Ottumwa, Iowa, and we flew these twin flights Navy Stearmans, and they were pretty interesting. The instructor that I had there was a guy who had been flying for 50, he was 50 years old, and he'd been flying a long time, and he did a lot of acrobats and so forth. He took me out, and he started to show me things that he could do. He, in the Stearman, you sit in the front seat, he sits in the back seat, and he has a microphone that he can talk to you, but it's really not an electrical thing, it's just a tube, and he talks to you in your ear. You can't say anything back to him. You can look up in the mirror and you can nod yes or no, but you can't say anything to him. But he took me out. We were flying along about 200 feet, and all of a sudden he dove down on the street, hit the street, bounced up over the telephone lines away, and he said, "Now, is there anything you know what to do?" And I said, "Yeah." So I went up to about 2,000 feet, and I did an outside loop, which I didn't know whether that was any good or not, because nobody ever does an outside loop. But I flew, and when we got all through, he said, "Fly me over to that field over there." And we did. Landed. He got out. He took his parachute with him. Didn't say anything to me. He went in a little shed that was warm, had a stove in it, was keeping him warm. So I took off, and I just flew around for an hour and a half and came back and picked him up. And he didn't say anything to me. We flew back, and I thought, well, he's going to ground me, but he didn't. The next day we went out together again. I know the first day, one of the things he did to me, I forgot to mention, was that he told me to put my hands over my head, and he flipped us around. We were flying upside down, and then he started moving the jack back and forth, so I was bobbing in and out on my safety belt. Fortunately, I had it hooked up, so. But he was an interesting guy. After that, I went to Ottumwa, Iowa. No, wait a minute. We were at Ottumwa, Iowa. And after that, I went to Corpus Christi. And there we were flying the SNJ, which was a two-seater, and it was a pretty good plane. It could go about 300 miles per hour. And we did a lot of formation flying. We did a lot of communications using the flags. So we got to a point where we had to know how to understand flags when they were flying. And also we did a lot of practice on bombings and practice on shooting and so forth. It was interesting, but we finally finished at Corpus Christi, and we got our wings. And then I went to Daytona Beach, and we picked up the Hellcats. And that was when I started flying the Hellcats. And we flew Hellcats for about 2-3 weeks, and we were coming around and going about 66 knots per hour and flying so that when we came by the landing signal officer, we could cut our throttle and land. So it was kind of practicing our landing on the carriers. So after we did that for about 3 weeks, we were going out to take carrier landings. They had given us a lieutenant who had been out on the carriers before, and he was our leader, and I was flying wing to him. So we finally saw the ship out there. It looked like a little rowboat to me, but when we finally got down there and in our forms going around the ship, coming around, they gave him a wave off. And I kept coming around, and they landed me right away, so I was the first one on the ship. It was kind of interesting. I taxied over all the way to the front of the ship, and so they kept leading me to bring me up to the front of the ship, and the last 10 feet I was going, all I could see was water, so I wasn't sure they were leading me in the wrong direction, but it worked out all right. After we learned how to fly on the carrier, we got orders to go to San Diego, and we were given 4 days to get to San Diego. So I flew back to Michigan to spend 2 days there with my family, and then I went on. We were flying in the DC-3, so you can't fly nonstop to San Diego. You have to stop 2 or 3 times getting out there. When we got out to San Diego, and they gave me 8 weeks vacation, and I'd already spent all my money going back to Detroit, so I had to stay out there in San Diego. But I went up to Los Angeles quite frequently, and enjoyed myself up there. After that vacation that I had out of San Diego, they assigned me to go to VF-7 carrier group that I was eventually with, and so they sent me up to Seattle, and I landed at Seattle, and in Seattle they had already, for some reason or other, I took an extra day. I was not reading those, go and proceed and all the different things, and so I was 1 day late getting into Seattle, and they said my squadron had already gone down to Oregon, so I went down to Oregon, and the next day, and I thought they were going to chew me out, but they didn't. So, but we went to. I guess I forgot to tell you, when we were in Corpus Christi, where we got our wings, we also went to a little place called Beeville, Texas, and we did instrument flying there. Sometimes we flew with a cover over our cockpits, so we couldn't see other than just reading our instruments. But at least we had the practice of knowing what would happen and how to fly in pretty bad situations. But anyway, we got through, and we joined our air group in Oregon, and we then started doing field landings. We did bombings, we did all kinds of other things, and eventually we got to a point where we were ready to get on a carrier. We got on the carrier group, and we started doing some strafing of islands and doing things like that, and we did a couple of times. We did some bombings of ships, and when we did that, our fighter planes, we would be at 20,000 feet, and the bombers would be at a much lower speed. But we'd all dive over the target at the same time, and we would pass these guys on the way down and pull up. But we'd be going with our machine guns going, so we'd keep the targets to a point where they weren't trying to hit the bombers. They were aiming at us because we were doing the damage. But then when we reached the bottom and pulled out, our bombers were about ready to drop their bombs. So it gave them a chance to not be out there, at a point where they would get hit when they're first starting their bombing run. So we went on a couple of bombing runs to ships. There'd always be a lot of machine guns coming at us while we were going down. We had a lot of interesting trips. We were around the Philippines a lot, and we eventually got over to the Japanese area. 20 years later, after I got out of the Navy, we were in Hawaiian Islands, and I ended up playing golf with two Japanese people there. And they finally asked, we went into the little bar at the end of our golf outing, and they said, oh, have you ever been to Japan? And I said, no, but I flew over it a few times in the early 40s, but I never did stop. And my wife kicked me in the shins when I was talking about that. But they looked dumbfounded at me, and then finally they began to laugh. But when I got out of the service at the end of 45, when the war was over, our carrier came in, and we took off about 300 miles out to sea, and we went over a football game in Portland, Oregon, and we went down on the field, and I was looking up at the broadcasters. I was down that low, and so we got up and kept going, and we landed at Seattle, and the next morning they wanted us to take off and go to Pasco, Washington with these planes. So we went there. We had to go over the Rocky Mountains, got to Pasco, Washington. This was like a desert out there. And so when everybody got back on shore, they had big outings all along the coast there, and we were out in Pasco, Washington, in the desert. When I got out, which was about first part of November of 1945, I also went back in and became a weekend warrior. I got $70 a month for flying on the weekends, and that was pretty nice. So went back to college for 3 years, got my diploma, and I was working for a company, and they finally transferred me in 1952 to Cincinnati. So I had to resign from my air group, and after about 2 weeks later, they start calling me up and say, hey, come on back, we're going to Korea. And I said, I can't do that. I got to get my family down at the new place in Cincinnati. And well, they kept calling me every week. Finally, about after a month and a half, I called back up there, and they had gone to Korea. So I was fortunate I didn't go to Korea. Pretty much that was my life in in the Navy. After the war, we were busy doing all kinds of things in the reserves. The last year, we did a lot of bombing and everything because of the Korean War possibilities. But that was the last time I went flying. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Yes.
What plane did you do carrier qualification in?
Hellcat.
Hellcat. Now you flew,
F6F. F6Fs. Hellcats. No. No. Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
what carrier did you fly off of?
Hancock.
Hancock.
Yeah.
CV-19.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Thank you very much.